These pictures in this folder are the retouch pictures I made in London in May 2015 when I went to Photo London. They are what I finished up with after going through and doing post-production on 500 or 600 photographs. There are 93 pictures in this file. I decided, as I often do, to make a 28-page bookwork using these pictures. It's not necessarily about London, it's about any place. However, I had the pictures and I wanted to make the work, and I thought I would make this video to talk about my editing and sequencing process. So on the left here are pictures that, from the retouched images, I have rejected immediately for use in the book. The pictures on the right are possible pictures for use in the book. When I'm working on these bookworks, I always start with a cover picture and a back cover picture as well. So here is this image, which I rather liked. It had a sort of an edgy, down and dirty look, which I liked. And I was looking at various other pictures for the back cover. This was one, but it just didn't seem to gel for me, and I've seen it and done it before, so I rejected that. I then looked at this picture here, which is a shot of my friend Nick holding up a printer's CMYK color strip off a printer's job, but it just seemed a bit vague and didn't amount to much. So finally, this is the back cover picture, and at the bottom here the type will go, my name and about 10 points and the edition information. There will be no type on the cover. I like this image because it was a foil to the down and dirty image on the cover. I then my next step in the process is to start putting the pairs of pictures together. Not necessarily in a sequential order, but just making pairs which I think work. To begin with, I made this pair here, and I started with this version here, which I really liked, but then I did a bit more work on it and I finished up with this, because you've got the whole red and green business of complementaries working, and it seemed completely obvious to me to pair that picture up with that. I mean, that looks like some sort of bondage cell, and this is a sort of a, well, it's an after picture, and they just seem to work together. And I like the fact that you've got the bright red and the greys of that working together. That was originally my starting pair. Later I moved that down to second spread, and I went with this. And it seemed to be a good starting point. It was pointing at something. It was pointing to actually 3 there. That was had no idea that he was pointing at 3, but I sort of liked that. 3's a good number. And I put it next to this woman that I photographed in London. I also looked at this picture of her, but I liked the sort of more confrontational look that she had in this picture here. And I liked the touch of red, and of course you've got red and green here again. Moving on, I then went with this picture here, and I was looking at 2 versions of that as well. This version here is more faithful to the original, but I just felt it was overly blue, so I took some of the blue out and we went with this. At this point I felt the whole thing was looking sort of somewhat sinister, Silence of the Lambs if you like, which I quite liked. I like how this picture with the arms and the filaments in those arms, how they sort of morphed into the twigs of that tree. When I'm making these bookworks, I try to include various different types of pictures so that I'm not just looking at the same sort of thing all the time. So when you go through the 28 pictures that I've got, there are pictures of some portraits that I've got there. I mean, you could even call this image a portrait of sorts. This woman here, this couple here, and my friend Lynn from Cologne down there, whom I photographed before, and this person here, and this figurative element there as well. And of course, in wanting to include these portraits, it's a question of giving each of them space so they don't crowd each other. So you can see there's one here, then there's a gap of a couple of pages, another gap there before we get down to the couple, more gap till we get down to Lynn there. Then the other sort of picture are those that are monochromatic and those that are brightly coloured, and I think that I like having a mix of that, and I like playing one off against another. The I played around with the pairings. To begin with, I had the picture of this red light bulb next to the woman with the orange or red fingernails, but it just seems so obvious. I hate in bookworks where it becomes completely and utterly obvious why one picture is put next to another. And I like having pictures that also don't appear obvious why one follows the other when you turn the page. So you can see there's a range of pictures here that work. Or the other element that I think is important to include are wider shots like this, which one could call a landscape picture. I like the construction of this picture. I've worked to a strictly vertical symmetry in the image, but there are lots of interplays going on here. I like the cross element that appears in this rather barbarous fence, and I like how there's a cross picking that up there. I like the demarcation of the white lines. There's a lot happening here. I like the guy stepping through the doorway with the orange folder or delivery. Often in pictures it's tiny things like that really make a picture work, I find. So then let's have a look at some of these other pictures over here that I rejected. In fact, let's have a look at the ones that I think, I'm thinking back why I even bothered to save some of these, because many of them just don't work. I like this. I like this mostly for this sign here, church this way. Which way? What? I tend to photograph things on the ground, because if you do that, it opens up the opportunity to photograph things that aren't on the ground and put them together, because I think that is a strategy that works as well, but that I think is boring. I quite like the shape here, but it doesn't go anywhere. Many of these pictures are what I call what you see is what you get pictures, or what you're looking at you can't actually figure out what I've got or what you've got. Quite like this. Haven't used it. There's a lot going on. I photograph ladders a lot. Ladders are very strong signifiers because they, of course, start somewhere and go somewhere else. I like the figure in the doorway, but maybe it was just too vague and wouldn't work, although I'm not rejecting that picture entirely. I quite like this. I like the shape of the dirt on the window and the windscreen wiper thing, but it just didn't seem to have the sort of substance that one would like. These clothes, well, I mean, we've seen hundreds of pictures like that, so again, why I shot that, I don't know. I think it's dangerous, although I do it, photographing other people's artwork. I guess you could call that other people's artwork. I don't know quite what's going on there now because I can't remember the context, but that was rejected as well. As with this image, it's a boat tied up in the Thames, and it's been very beautifully painted. Not in Banksy style, but in a style that's quite interesting. And I just like the yellow steps and these yellow lines, but I rejected that because I don't like using other people's artwork. So those are many of the rejects. Over here, here's another picture that I quite like, but I've rejected it as well, and it's of a shop redo in possibly Bond Street or somewhere in London, and there's this photograph with the door panel and the lock. But I've done that sort of thing before, so I thought, why do it again? I quite like that for its simplicity. I like crosses in images, but again, I just didn't think there was enough going on there. So here is the edit. I hope now there's enough surprise in it to make it work. I like putting pictures together where the viewer's response is, you know, what is going on here, as opposed to, okay, so what, don't show me that boring sort of picture. Because we all make boring pictures. The question is identifying them and not using them. Here's someone else's artwork that I've used, but it's been taken to another level. I just like the sophisticated lady business, and whoever wrote that I don't think was particularly sophisticated. Certainly they couldn't spell. The hand print I liked, and there were two versions of that, and I ended up using this, although the hand is quite close to the spike, but I quite like how there are various panels in this image. I like that. This image had a strange connotation to me, and it seemed to work with the couple, and so on and so forth. So this is the edit. I did this actually I've changed because I think the pairing is far too obvious. You've got this bit of dead creeper, and then you've got the hair which mirrors that, and I just think it's too obvious. I can't remember now exactly what I changed it to. I think in fact I might have done this, and I think this is much more interesting. It's what fascinates me is how one image informs the other. I think with those two images together, it made the image of the woman with the nails much more benign than having that. I mean, that sort of immediately to me invokes something quite sinister, and I like that. This possibly is too obvious, but I like how the hat mirrors the this circle and that shadow in that image. It sort of seems to work to me, possibly too easy. And I think there's something sinister and strange going on here with that guy. Again, I'm using somebody else's art, but I really liked how that was ripped and how it was reflected in this in the wall, and how I've divided it into two. And that I like as well. Just a simple light bulb, and picture really only works because of the packaging and things in here. There's a sort of a sense for me of what might have happened or what is about to happen. Whatever it is, it may not be very pleasant. So this is the edit, and I just I mean, it can always be done better. It can always be done a different way, but it's right now my best shot. This was an image I made at London Photo, and it's behind the burgundy coloured cloth is the only existing picture of Fox Talbot's image Veronica in Bloom, and I really liked it exactly the way it was without looking at Veronica at all. So this is where it's at. I hope that was helpful. Now you can go out and make your own book.